I received this amazing job offer that could almost double my current salary. It was out of state, which meant I had to travel and potentially relocate. Since I live alone in a tiny apartment, I thought, why not? I started by booking an Airbnb for 2 nights since the interview was scheduled over 2 days. Everything seemed fine until I hit the road. While driving along the highway, my car decided to throw a curveball, a flat tire. The catch: I didn't have a spare. I had to call and believe it or not, they don't provide spare tires. They towed my car, and luckily, I found a nearby shop to replace the tire. The downside? It cost me nearly 4 hours of precious time. By the time I reached the Airbnb, it was 1 a.m. I was disappointed but kept a positive attitude, knowing I had an interview to attend the next morning. As I pulled up to the Airbnb, I noticed that the houses in the neighborhood had no driveways, so everyone parked on the street. Now, I must admit, I didn't do much research on this Airbnb because it was just a temporary stay. My criteria were simple: a comfy bedroom and a functional kitchen. I parked a couple of houses down and retrieved the lockbox code from the email. I opened it, and you won't believe what happened next. It was empty. No key. I assumed the owner must have forgotten to leave the key in the lockbox. I tried calling the owner multiple times, but no response. I even left a voicemail, explaining my situation. Realizing that I wouldn't hear back until the next day, panic started to set in. I was essentially stranded in the middle of the night. I had no other option but to try knocking on the door, hoping for a miracle. It didn't work. I walked back to my car, searching for nearby hotels. But it was 2 a.m., and every hotel within a reasonable distance was fully booked due to a medical convention in the city. To make matters worse, the neighborhood didn't seem particularly safe, and sleeping in my car wasn't a comforting idea. Just as I was about to resign myself to sleeping in my car, a light in the house I was supposed to stay in flicked on. It piqued my curiosity. Against my better judgment, I decided to approach the house and knocked on the door. After a minute, the door swung open, revealing a man in his mid-30s, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. I asked if he lived there, and he looked puzzled, replying that he was renting it for the week. I explained that I'd booked it on Airbnb, but he said he'd rented it on Zillow. Something was definitely off, and it seemed like a mix-up with the property listing. He introduced himself as Zach and kindly invited me inside while we figured things out. At this point, I was freezing and needed to use the restroom. The stress of the day caught up with me, and I found myself sobbing in the bathroom. The prospect of spending the night in my car or with this stranger wasn't appealing. I regained my composure and returned to the living room, where I continued my desperate search for a place to stay. After 20 minutes with no luck, Zach offered me a place to stay for the night, explaining that the neighborhood wasn't safe. Despite my reservations, I accepted his offer and thanked him, opting to sleep in the bedroom while he took the couch. As I entered my room and placed my suitcase on the dresser, something caught my eye: Zach's wallet. Now, I'm not typically nosy, but given the circumstances, I decided to take a look. Inside, I found an ID with a picture of Zach, but the name on the card was Benjamin, not Zachary, as he'd introduced himself. This discovery raised even more questions, but I didn't want to alarm myself unnecessarily. I calmly left the room, placed the wallet in the kitchen, and casually mentioned to Zach that he'd left it in the bedroom. For the first time that night, I sensed a nervousness in his response. He thanked me and seemed caught off guard. The unsettling feeling grew as I realized there was no lock on my bedroom door. I checked the bathroom, and it was the same story, no locks. Great. Exhausted and stressed beyond belief, I collapsed into bed. However, my troubled night was far from over. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by the creaking of my bedroom door. My heart raced as I saw a shadowy figure moving down the hallway, heading toward the living room and kitchen. I was alone and vulnerable, with a stranger lurking in the dark. I quietly sat up, clutching my suitcase, and decided to make a daring escape. To reach the front door, I'd have to pass through the living room where this mysterious person was. I couldn't risk it, so I started exploring the house for an alternative exit. 3 other doors lined the hallway. The first 2 were storage rooms, and I assumed the third would be the same. But as I opened it, I froze in terror. It was a guest bedroom with a broken window facing the backyard. I didn't hesitate. I jumped out of that window, making more noise than I'd have liked. But at that point, I didn't care. I landed in the yard, my heart pounding. I dragged my suitcase along as I moved around the side of the house. As I was about to pop the trunk and make my escape, I noticed a light flick on inside the house. I watched as the front door slowly swung open, revealing Zach, or whoever he was, staring at me through the screen door. I wasted no time and bolted out of there. I drove straight to the police station and reported that a random man was staying in my Airbnb and had stalked me while I slept. I explained how he introduced himself as Zach, but his ID said Benjamin. The police arrived at the house, only to find it completely vacant. It was an eerie feeling knowing that I had spent the night with a complete stranger who had broken in and pretended to be the host. I shudder to think what might have happened if I hadn't woken up and escaped. Looking back, I can't help but question my judgment and trust in such a dire situation. It seemed like my only choice at the time, given my desperation. But it's a stark reminder that we should always prioritize safety, even in the most unexpected situations. And that, my friends, is the wild tale of my Airbnb nightmare. Remember, always be cautious, even when you think you're making the right decision. Thanks for listening to my story.